The production of this video was made possible by donors to the Orchestration Online Patreon initiative. Please consider adding your support to the creation of free educational internet resources by visiting our Patreon page linked below.
Hey there, this is your orchestration tutor Thomas Goss. If you've been sticking with me through the viewing of these 3 short numbers that comprise the Carmina Burana Song 9 medley, then welcome back. If not, then jump back to watch the first 2 videos. We've reached the most intimate, love-struck moment in the medley, which in a sense represents the revealed heart of the entire Thematic section of songs and dances. Our protagonists have danced every which way from primitive to formal, and teased each other in song about wanting and not wanting affection, all out in the greenery of nature near the castle or village. But when all this energy and emotional bantering is distilled, the meaning is very clear. Our would-be lovers are yearning desperately for one another. Since this video's scoring is so quickly explained, and its meaning so plain, we'll use the leftover time to take a more detailed look at the overall structure of Thematic, its key relationships, contrasts of tempo, and dramatic arcs. But first, let's give Kumazalamin its due, simple though it may seem on the surface. The middle-high German lyrics are quite direct and frank in their intention, and yet not without a certain level of poetry. The proposition is made, the desire is announced. Sweet rose-red lips are like medicine. The phrase, mache mich gesund, is essentially asking to be made healthy again, implying a certain heartsickness. It's quite interesting here that in the ancient Carmina Burana source manuscript, the lyrics Orff sets as a soft, sensitive ballad are in reality the chorus to the quite randy poem Veni, Veni, Venias, which he turns into a different song near the end of the song cycle with feisty up-tempo music. This all just underlines how Orff used his text to suit his own dramatic vision, rather than trying to fulfill their original context and intentions. But in this setting, there's no need to look over the instrumentation in any detail, just to observe from the beginning that it will be coro piccolo altos, tenors, and basses, a full string section, then 4 violin soli, muted horns, and finally solo flute and a pair of B-flat clarinets. As he did in earlier songs, Orff conjures up emotional closeness with very small groupings of players, and even the full string section's impact is lessened with the drier timbre of pizzicato at the beginning. In the previous song, we heard how fortissimo stacked fifths plucked by all 2 to 3 dozen violinists could create a jangling sound, like mandolins twanging away fiercely. Here we observe that pizzicato stretched across the section, using lots of lower open pitches, and played at a slower, more processional pace, can emulate the sound of strummed lutes and guitars. And in doing so, this time Orff really is drawing on an authentic well of musical heritage, as both instruments definitely were around back in the Middle Ages, and were used in this way to accompany songs of love and courtship. Back in C major now, we see how that key optimizes the open strings for the harmony Orff wants to build. An easy quadruple stop chord in cellos, low C5th on open low strings, under an easy-fingered E6th, with violas above strumming essentially the same chord, but leaving out the top C. Second violins strum their open low G5th, while first violins merely notch the upper pitch up a whole step to E, the same as the top note of the violas. That means that taken all together across all 11 pitches, 7 of them are beautifully resonant, more sustained open strings. Meanwhile below, the double basses play a simple pulsing C, with a little mezzo-staccato lift at the end. The opening represents a quite evocative sound picture, and a great way of immediately bringing the energy down after the anarchic revelry of Sfatsigat Umba. At the vocal entrance, the strumming strings drop down to pianissimo, and the altos make the first melodic statement, beautifully positioned around their lower mix and chest voice. Add a soft dynamic, and with a legato slur across each phrase, the result is a winsome, yearning quality of complete honesty and vulnerability. Notice the limited range of pitches, and familiar children's song melodic contours. There's a wonderful emotional simplicity in the way that each statement settles down to the tonic each time. The altos are answered by first tenors, singing the same line back to them in reverse order, while the second tenors provide some contrary motion and harmonization, at first with a little bite of the sus2 on D relaxing down to the root, then providing the lower tones for that little horn harmony we've seen recently of 5th, 3rd, 5th, 6th. Meanwhile, divisi choir basses join in below with the repeated invitation to come and join them, with the lower singers droning on the low C, and the upper singers providing just a little more polyphony into the mix. It's a beautifully enchanting mixture, adding emotional complexity after such a plainly stated opening. Doubling every single choir pitch, muted horns softly blend, adding timbral richness and a slightly brighter edge rather than being heard in their own right. And, catching the overtones of that brighter edge, the violins play the same notes an octave higher, underlining the body of tone of both choir and horns. At the bottom, double basses merely continue their low C pulse, adding a subtle heartbeat to the magical texture. That wealth of meaning and color is contrasted with the devastatingly lucid and unadorned meditation for solo flute, un poco espressivo, wandering down into its warm middle register, perhaps calling back to quite ancient times when flute was associated with a kind of simplistic intimacy and love-making by both Romans and classical Greeks. The accompaniment is also quite spare and yet evocative, a drone of a sounding C5 on clarinets, doubled by pulsing soli first violins. All of the repressive and judgmental expectations of authoritative medieval societal rules and expectations stripped aside, the oneness of two consenting souls is something without shame or overblown drama. And that's really all there is to this bewitching little song. The second half is musically identical to the first, using the second set of lyrics about rose-red lips healing lovesickness. I'll play that for you now with the score, after which, let's orient ourselves after arriving halfway through the massive score of Carmina Burana. After Kuma, Kumazalamin, the medley reprises Sfatsigat Umba, and then immediately jumps to the last song in the Auf dem Anger section, Wäre du Welt Alamin. I already released that song as a preview back when I first announced this series of Carmina Burana score analysis videos. So that means you can just go on to that next video in the playlist after this, which finishes up the entire first part of Carmina Burana, starting with the opening two songs of Fortuna Imperatrix Mundi, then Primo Verde, with its slowly brightening songs of Verdis Lete Facies, Omnia Sol Temperat, and Ecce Gratum. Then this series of celebratory songs and dances, Auf dem Anger. Now, I'll admit to selectively ignoring a certain word throughout the last half dozen videos, and that word is attacca. Literally, to attack the end of a movement with the start of the next movement, going directly from one to the other with minimal delay, if not instantaneously, which is not always possible considering mute changes and so on. Considering that every single number in the Auf dem Anger section, except for the last one, ends with the word attacca, in a sense, the whole suite of pieces is a kind of medley of its own. And like any medley, there are certain thematic and dramatic threads that are instructive to look at, especially in terms of understanding Carmina Burana as one complete work. First, let's look at key relationships. I've already mentioned the use of C trumpet several times in recent videos, and I'll have a full breakdown in the next video covering Wäre du Welt Alamin. But here I'll just point out that their use makes sense considering how Auf dem Anger starts and ends in C major, and generally hangs around that key with a couple of side trips to G major, and to C major's relative minor of A. But what's more important in this analysis is how we ended up at C major in the first place. And the reason why is obvious from a kind of simplistic, instinctive sense of modulation. The opening songs had to be centered around D minor, both for the optimum range of the singers and the open pitches of string multiple stops. This, as you'll remember, led ultimately to the relative major of F in resolving the anxieties of the chilly turning of the wheel of fortune, and the welcoming in of the warmth of springtime. So starting the next group of songs and dances with a declamatory introduction in C is a kind of key change that feels perfectly natural, going up the circle of fifths 1 degree with tons. Then Orff does the same thing, pushing into the next song, Floret Silva Nobilis, pushing rightward on the circle of fifths yet another degree to the key of G. Notice that with each of these shifts, the character of the music appears to brighten a bit, both in natural resonance and in the color of musical texture. So when Orff stays in G, going from the self-referential meditation of Floret Silva Nobilis' final chord to the childlike nursery chant of Kramer gibt die Warwe mehr, the innocence and sense of anticipation appears at its most fresh and youthful. Then, as we saw in that song's analysis video, the proclamations and invitations of the maidens lapse into dreamy passages which might be interpreted as either G mixolydian with a minor seventh built into the modality, or as an implied transitional chord back to C major. Throughout the song, Orff chooses to lean towards the former, as the tonal center of a root G is constantly re-established. but then finally engages the latter interpretation of a G dominant ninth, resolving to the C major downbeat of the next dance, Raya. And this all fits beautifully once again with Orff's scheme of keys that optimize open strings and multiple stops, going from Raya's C major to Svartshigat-Umba's relative A minor. Which runs back up to C major, hangs on a G dominant ninth again, as if Orff intended ending on a perfect cadence. But then jumps back to A, major instead of minor this time. That means that going back to C major, for Kumazalamin, will feel fresh instead of inevitable. Then the same transitions occur again, Svartshigat-Umba recapping to end the medley. Followed by Wäre du Welt allemin, once again A major to C major, but this time with blasting trumpet fanfares continuing the intensity. Throughout all these changes of key, we see also changes of mood, scope, and tempo, even within the same song. These all fit the lyrics well and build a kind of dramatic narrative of dancing in the town square, romantic teasing and frustration, leading to expressions of interest, then more serious approaches, more teasing, romantic invitations, and then finishing off with a passionate pledge to indulge in the pleasures of this world, the ultimate for a young Goliard being a single night with the most beautiful woman in the world, the Queen of England. As usual, though, there's even more going on. These key changes favor a kind of instrumental color and vocal register ideal to the context of each number across the entire Auf dem Anger section, with certain gestures and melodic arcs being repurposed, sometimes obviously, at other times quite subtly. The most obvious is how Orff bounces back and forth between the mediant and dominant in many places. Even reusing this interval in context with a syncopation at the end. Sometimes the quotes have a more indirect, more symbolic relationship, as when the basic melody of Tanz is rewritten to fit Kumazalamin. But I feel the melodic hook that ties everything together is the use of the submediant, along with our old friends the mediant and the dominant, the Bye Baby Bunting motif. Which we hear throughout Auf dem Anger in different contexts. And, of course, there are any number of other little touches. the harmonized horn call patterns of thirds, fourths, fifths, and sixths in different places, and the little closing riffs of the first number, Tanz, and the last number, Wäre du Welt allemin. So in the final analysis, though many pages in this overall section of songs are scored rather simply, with childlike melodies and basic chord progressions, one can see a wonderfully integrated vision at work that's combining, contrasting, and interweaving many different musical, dramatic, and cultural threads to evoke the medieval worldview from the Goliard's perspective, a universe of humor, adventure, courtship, and sensual gratification, in dedication to Venus, ever conscious of the fickleness of fortune. And with all that said, go ahead and watch the next video on the playlist with all the fanfares and the ode to Eleanor of Aquitaine, and then stand by for the next section of Carmina Burana with all the funny, over-the-top drinking songs in Taberna, starting next month. Hope to see you then.